The NBA has been the best basketball league in the world for as long as we can remember. The NBA isn't the same as it used to be, with players reaping new skill sets, losing old skill sets, and new rules being put into place. The NBA is quite different from even 20 years ago. With that in mind, the NBA isn't perfect, no one can deny that. Whether it's shitty calls or just bad reffing in general, everyone is going to have a problem with the league for one reason or another. So, what are some rule changes that would benefit the NBA? First, we have to keep in mind that the NBA is one giant business. The leaders of the company don't necessarily care too much about the basketball itself, it cares more about the money it's bringing in. Most of these rules keep that in mind. Anyhow, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s, players were basically limited to having their palm facing the ground when they're dribbling. And listen, no one wants that, but when you've got guys basically double dribbling on every dribble move and crossover, it just gets ridiculous. Take for example this play. In an important possession in the fourth quarter, Kevin Durant clearly fumbles the ball, picks it back up with two hands, and continues the play. The uncalled travels are bad, clearly displayed by Shaq and a fool, and the amount of times the ball gets carried in a game is outrageous. Now, this is without a doubt one of the most gray rules, as it is pretty hard as a referee to catch, being that basketball is a fast-paced sport, but it's like, come on. If the NBA can just start calling the more ridiculous carries a turnover, then it would be much more enjoyable and less painful to watch. Expand the three-point line, expand the three-point line, expand the three-point line. Yes, I said that 3 times, because it needs to happen. Three-pointers are getting way out of hand. It's gone from an exciting part of the game to just a regular shot. It's completely joyless as of now. The only thing making it more impressive than a layup is that it yields 3 points. If we look at the 3-point attempt graph from when it was implemented in 1979 to now 2020, we can see the huge rise in 3-point attempts. With this, the aggression of the game has gone down, clearly shown by this free throw graph overlay, and as of now, teams are shooting over 10 more 3-pointers per game than they are free throws. Now, the thing is, 3-point efficiency hasn't gone up in over 25 years, only the volume. This doesn't necessarily mean players are getting better at shooting threes, because they clearly are, but just that the volume is obviously rising as players are becoming more skilled at shooting them. If we look at yet another graph, this time with the percentage of points produced with 3-pointers and 2-pointers, it's going up unsurprisingly. Anyhow, enough with the math shit, and on to some math shit. So how would we do this? If we look at the court itself, we see one major discrepancy, the corner 3. Undoubtedly the most efficient shot in the game of basketball. When the 3-point line was introduced, it wasn't a big deal that the corner 3 was shorter. In fact, it has been beneficiary if we look at the big picture. But now that we are hypothetically expanding the 3-point line, we need to do something about this. The space between the out of bounds line and the corner 3-point line is currently 3 feet. Let's say we expand the corner 3-point line by 2 feet, which is a reasonable length to add. That will give 1 foot of space to get your shot off in the corner. Not exactly sufficient. So logically, the best solution to this would just be to not expand the corner 3. However, I think we can all agree that that's a terrible idea. Corner 3s are a good thing to have prioritized over regular 3s, since you essentially cannot do anything else in the corner with the ball, at least a lot less than the top of the key for example. But we don't want players launching over 30 corner 3s per game, do we? No, most definitely no. So really the only logical option here is to expand the court on the x-axis. It won't really affect the game like it would if we per se expanded the court on the y-axis, so it shouldn't necessarily be a problem except for the fact that NBA teams' arenas would have to switch up the seating to accommodate the extra room. Another option in this department is to just remove the 3 altogether, and me personally, I would be all for it, but we all know that's not going to happen with how widely accepted the tray has become. Now, yet another physical change to the court. Thin out the lane. If you don't know what the lane is, another word for it is the key. In 1951, George Mikan happened. The key was widened from 6 to 12 feet. In 1964, Wilt Chamberlain happened. The key was widened from 12 to 16 feet. And yes, that was basically the description of the rule. Wilt Chamberlain caused that rule. So why would the lane be widened in the first place? You probably know the 3-second in the key rule. Well, if the lane is 6 feet wide, it will be much harder to get a 3-second in the key violation than if it were 16 feet wide, simply because it is less distance to the rim. The fact of the matter is, we don't have any Wilt Chamberlains anymore. We don't have any George Mikans. The post game is dying. It will never die per se, but if we can introduce it as a prominent part of the game again, then more than a lot of people will be pleased. And yes, 16-year-old boys, that does include boomers. This will not only make back to the basket players more effective, but it will also aid shot blockers in defending the rim as they have to cover less ground when outside the key. Why do the rules not scrutinize shot clock violations? It's painful to watch a team get rewarded for not hitting the rim after the clock has expired and then the other team having to inbound the ball. A shot clock violation is a turnover and it should be treated like one. Let the team who got the defensive stop run the floor afterwards. The rule change here is allowing the defense to grab a loose ball after the shot clock expires. No whistle will blow the play dead and they can go and score in transition. The league wants to promote scoring, so why not add this rule? If the offensive team somehow gains possession of the ball, for example, them catching the loose ball after the shot goes up, then the refs can call it back. It's like in football where if Team B fouls Team A, but keeps possession of the ball, then nothing will be called. No stoppage of play, and Team A will not get penalized for being fouled. This is called advantage in football, and I believe it would be a smart idea to implement into basketball. Alright, here's the big one. Bring back hand checking. I made a video about this a while back, you know, if you want to check it out, but this is something that not only in mine, but lots of other people's minds needs to be brought back. Dunks are very meh, not boring, but like threes aren't as special anymore. With the lack of perimeter defense and the amount of spacing in today's game, there are more dunks than ever. If we look at the dunks per year, in general it is clearly going up. Between the 2000-2001 season and the 2003-2004 seasons, there were only 29 teams in the league, so as an estimate we will add the median value of all the teams' amount of dunks to the total value. We will also have to do this with the 2011-2012 season because it was a lockout season. Still, we can see that the amount of dunks per game is rising. Keep in mind, player tracking wasn't available until the 2000-2001 NBA season, so there is no way to see the amount of dunks prior to that. Anyhow, the amount of dunks is clearly going up, and you may ask, what about pace? There are more shots per game than there were 20 years ago, and yes, that is a valid speculation to this. But if we look at yet another graph of the percentage of dunks as a factor of points in the paint divided by 2, we can see that it is rising as well. If you can't understand what this graph is showing, in non-mathematical terms, it is the percentage of shots made in the paint that are dunks. So, for example, for the 2018-2019 season, it would be 0.19067463306053456 as an exact value. Therefore, around 19% of the shots made in the paint are dunks, almost 1 out of every 5. So yes, there are more dunks than ever. It is partially attributed to the emphasis on spacing and defenses having to focus more on perimeter shots, and then partially attributed to defenses essentially not being able to contain drives anymore without fouling. This isn't a jab at James Harden, but you know, it just ruins the game when we have players doing this. And this. It's not fun for anyone except maybe Rockets fans, but that makes me think. Not to throw shade or anything, but do real Rockets fans know the BS that's going on, or not? Anyhow, I told myself I wasn't going to rant on Harden, so I am not. We need hand checking again if we hope to accentuate perimeter defenders. If we look at all the defensive player of the years from history, we can see it was predominantly given out to guards, wings specifically. After that, there was a large gap, then Gary Payton received it in 1996. After that, no guard has received the award, and the only quote-unquote perimeter defender to receive it since then was Kawhi Leonard in 2015 and 2016. Since it is harder to be an elite perimeter defender, teams have put less emphasis on it. Although defense will always be an important part of basketball and will always be a necessity to win championships, it is slowly becoming obsolete. Players aren't bad defenders, it's just that the league almost prevents them from achieving their prime on the defensive end. A big narrative going around is surrounding load management, specifically Kawhi Leonard. Now, although this rule doesn't specifically surround Kawhi, we all know who's the biggest culprit of this. Now, load management is smart, there's no denying that. Saving yourself for important and playoff games is a strategic move. However, it does impact the NBA in a negative way. A, it doesn't give players who, for example, play all 82 games any credit. If you are wanting to save yourself for the playoffs, then that probably means you are on a contending team, and that is one of, if not the only thing you are going for. So there should be no problem in you not making as much money. And B, it hurts the NBA in terms of revenue. Who are the casual fans going to see? They aren't going to watch Jared Dudley come off the bench for 8 minutes a game, they're going to see Anthony Davis and LeBron James play. Now, this isn't a real example, but you get my point. The NBA makes its money from the fans who maybe don't know a ton about the game. so it's obviously going to hurt them financially. My suggestion here is that players get paid on a per game basis essentially. Now obviously disregarding injuries, players would not get paid for games where they rest. In the NBA currently, the only exception to salaries that franchises can make with their players is the disabled player exception, where if a player is injured for a prolonged period of time, most often an entire season, then the team gets salary relief. Where, not to make it complicated, but franchises essentially get salary relief from the NBA because of the player not playing. So, pay players on a per game basis and start rewarding players financially who play more games. Now, these were 7 rules that I feel like the NBA should implement. Now, if you couldn't see, most of these rules are essentially anti-softness rules, but for a good reason. If you can't see that the NBA is getting soft along with all other sports, then I don't know what to say. But most people feel like this is a problem, hardcore and casual fans alike. So, bringing back real basketball would please everyone. Well, most people, but aside from this, these rules are just to make basketball better. The NBA affects every league in the world, from leagues overseas to rec leagues in Nebraska. And why wouldn't it? Who wouldn't want to look up to the most talented basketball players in the world? Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If this gets a lot of traction, I will make a part 2 as there are some potential rule changes I want to talk about. But I worked hella hard in this video, took over a month as you can see from my last video. But thank you buddies for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.